Order, order. Welcome to another episode of Reporters Without Orders, a podcast where we discuss what made news, what did not, and what absolutely should not have. Today, we have with us our in-house journalist Priyanka and my former colleague Tanishka Sodhi, who now works for the Quint. Welcome, Tanishka.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Nice to be on the other side.
Yeah. So today we are going to discuss two stories, one interview and one story by Priyanka and Tanishka. So Priyanka and Tanishka has reported on the Outlook magazine. It's a profile on Outlook. They have traced its history since 1995 to the present, the changes within Outlook, and there are a lot of other things there. Like we're going to discuss about it. Since our childhood, we have we look to this magazine as a source of information. It used to have very hit-hitting stories. Some of the best editors, journalists, and like some of their journalists have become very big names like Tarun Tespal, Aniruddha Bahal, and this kind of the guys whom as a when we were in school or college, we used to look up to this journalist as an ideal. So why did you guys decide to cover Outlook? This is a question for both of you.
So this year actually marks 30 years since Outlook started. It started in 95 and it's 30 years now. And Outlook, if you have been following over the last few months, over the last few years, it is not the same Outlook by any means, like the Outlook that you described. The coverage has completely changed. There has been a shift in not just what they cover, but also how they cover, what they give importance to. And of course, magazines as a whole in India are not really thriving. So it won't be fair to say that it's just Outlook that has underperformed over the last few years. But Outlook's journey and its fall from Vinod Mehta's magazine and one of India's best investigative journalism magazines to what it is now has really been monumental and worth documenting. I mean, Newslaundry covers media extensively, and this is a story that was actually waiting to be happened, because when I reached out to sources and people who had worked at Outlook or were working at Outlook, they were like, finally someone is writing about this. So, yeah.
And what about you?
So I remember getting into journalism, and Outlook was one of the reasons when I started journalism. You know, you had this vision that, oh my God, we can change the world, because you had these hard-hitting investigative stories, big scams being uncovered, radio tapes and whatnot. You know, and you really thought that you could make a difference. But now that you look back, I remember buying an issue last year before the elections, and I learned absolutely nothing from that magazine.
Okay.
You know, I flipped through pages and pages, and so many words, but nothing for the magazine to say, to tell their readers. So I was really like, have I picked up the wrong magazine? Is it the same Outlook?
Right.
So, you know, you had to look at that, what is happening? Is this just one issue which has not come out right, maybe right before the elections? And even during, after, before the elections, there were no big stories.
Right.
Nothing sharp, no very insightful analysis, you know, that tells the reader something that like a daily publication cannot. You know, sometimes daily publications have their own
more or
limits.
less like reason for covering, like, you know, picking up Outlook to as a story was same for both of you. So when you guys are reporting, what are some, like, we always come across some of the interesting facts, no, which we may not know earlier, or some of the facts which are funny or which are very interesting, like we only got to know when we start reporting. So what are those, such interesting
there are
facts
things,
for?
but I have a very clear favorite. Is a reporter told me how they were asked to write a piece in an as imagined version.
Yeah.
So it went with their byline, but it went as imagined by XYZ. They were asked to imagine that they are XYZ years old and they have experienced certain things. And I mean, that is basically the idea of reportage at Outlook now, which is, as you know, I've covered media for so much time at Newslaundry, but the kind of instances that you come to know have been happening at Outlook have been, initially it's like, oh wow, what is this? This is crazy. But as you get more into it, literally some people have teared up while speaking about their experiences, you know.
Is it because, is it good or like?
It has become a very toxic space over the last few years. As you know, the last three editors after Vinod Mehta, they all left on not so great terms. They left because of, I mean, you can read more about it in the magazine, but there has been managerial interference. But the current editor, Chinki Sinha, tried to talk to her many times, to her and the CEO. They did not speak to us. But under her, Outlook has taken a particularly different shift. I mean,
Okay, and it was since 2019 around, or it was before that?
no, it was before that. I think the editor after Vinod Mehta came in 2000.
Vinod Mehta
15,
left.
15 Krishna Prasad, then there was another editor, then there was Ruben Banerjee, and his exit
Yes.
made a lot of news.
Noise, I remember
made a lot of
that.
noise. And Chinki Sinha has been here since September 2021. And since then, I mean, it's not like Outlook was doing great before that, but after that, it has taken an even more, you know,
Mellowed
unpleasant
down.
turn.
Right,
Yeah.
right. What about you? What facts did you find more interest? Like, some facts which you didn't think, you will find in this story, or like
So
kind
a
of
more
characters that you
interesting
may have
fact was that Vinod Mehta, like people associated Outlook with Vinod Mehta, and Vinod Mehta was the face of Outlook for like 15 years, but he wasn't even the first choice for
Okay.
heading Outlook. It was Chandan Mitra. So
Right.
that was something new we learned.
Mhm.
And also the kind of the former editors who have worked for decades with Outlook, they haven't picked up the magazine in years. They have no idea what the magazine does anymore. For them, it's become irrelevant in the sense that it doesn't make any noise. We asked so many people, when was the last time you picked up an Outlook issue? Do you know what's happening at the magazine today? Like, no, we haven't read the magazine in ages because
Okay.
we don't think it makes any noise anymore. It uncovers any exposes, scams, nothing at all.
So, Tanishka, you used to cover media for Newslaundry for last 3-4 years. So you have an experience in covering media. So, as you have said, and both of you have been pointing out one thing, there has been a lot of changes in the content of the magazines over the last few years. So, if you compare this, like as you have said, it has become some kind of more of a literary magazine of late, but it was a hard-hitting magazine. So, if you have to be very specific about these changes in the magazine, like, compare it with the Vinod Mehta's era and the present under Chinki Sinha or maybe Ruben. So how do you like analyze these two, like, these two periods editorially, like difference in editorial approaches and like, changes in the editorial lines? And you might have spoken to the journalists and editors in the newspaper. What did they tell about this, like, editorial changes?
So to know that, read the full story on Newslaundry because that is the crux of what we've tried to say.
But you can say
so
in
a
brief.
couple of examples is like we have discussed earlier in the podcast how the hard-hitting stories were, whether it's Radia tapes, whether it's the cricket betting controversy. So many of these stories, Outlook, even their first story was a unique story. The first cover story was about, it was the first opinion poll in Kashmir, and it really made waves, to say is an understatement. I mean, copies were burnt. It was followed up by everyone. That's how Outlook arrived. And what has happened now is it has definitely taken a softer turn. But again, like a couple of people I spoke to who have worked at Outlook said that it's not necessarily bad if you want to do more feature stories, if you want that to be the approach of the magazine. So the problem is not in that, but the problem is that there are very few reported stories now. There are pieces, not stories. And
Right. It's not newsy anymore, you mean?
Yeah, and if it is newsy, the approach it's very different. It is not what you would expect a magazine of Outlook's caliber to be reporting on. And I mean, again, problems are not just in the content, but also in the environment and in how difficult it has been for journalists to do their job with the kind of leadership of the editor-in-chief and the CEO. And, there have been almost 70 people who have left in the last 3 years. I mean, that does not happen to just any place. I mean, there is the culture has changed so prominently that it has been impossible to do the kind of work that Outlook could have done years ago. And as someone told me in a quote, if you write about Shakespeare, no one is going to go after you, right? So, okay, we'll get to more on that later, but yeah.
Yeah. And also, like, how when you were analyzing the content of, like, about this period, like, for you, when did this change started? Like, if you have to be specific, and when did this change of editorial direction has taken place in Outlook?
So things had started changing right after the radio tapes fallout. Like how Vinod Mehta, who was at the helm, who launched the magazine, was the editor-in-chief. He was pushed to being in a larger ceremonial position. He was the editorial chairman. He was not calling the shots anymore. So things had started to change right around 2012-13. But still, Outlook would do news stories, investigative pieces now and then. Like there's the Operation Baby Lift done by Neha Dikshit, or the cover story over which Ruben Banerjee allegedly got fired was about that how the government was missing during the COVID pandemic.
Right. That cover story actually made some noise.
Yeah, that was the last time it did.
Prime Minister,
Yeah. So, but after Chinki Sinha was made the editor-in-chief, you don't see, forget hard-hitting exposes, you don't even see politicians on the cover. Be it opposition leaders, be it the one time in the last 2-3 years, I think our Prime Minister has made to the Outlook cover only twice or thrice. The last time he made to the Outlook cover, which comes out at least thrice in a month, was in February 2024. So that is symbolic of the kind of changes the magazine has undergone. And it's not like that it doesn't talk about things like, say, the rise of Hindutva. It does, but in a very academic fashion. Like one of the issues that came out in March, it talks about religious tourism against this rising wave of Hindutva. But it doesn't talk about, like, it talks about Mahakumbh, but there is no ground reportage from Mahakumbh. It doesn't take a very hardcore line against the government calling for investigations, for further government probe against the deaths, several deaths at the stampede there, or amongst other things, like for example, the Delhi elections. There's no ground reportage on the elections. And economy, for example, you don't see that how the economy failing is affecting people here. You'll just have some very over-the-top commentary. That's it, but no insightful reportage.
Okay, so you have one subhead on Vinod Mehta itself, like Vinod Mehta era. So it is a very long, it has a lot of insights, lot of journalists, name of journalists, which has been like, which are now very popular and which has made their name in this industry. So in case of Vinod Mehta, did you find anything which is more which is worth telling to people, like which is not like, I have read Lucknow Boy, so I know some of, like,
I could have borrowed the book from you.
But like did any of those his colleagues of that period told you anything about him as a editor, or like what did you explore in terms of Vinod's editorial role or his whole...
I mean, he was a reporter's editor by hook or crook, and he was, I mean, if he would see reporters in the office, he would be like, why are you here? How many people have you met today? Tell me that. I mean, and I believe he was not hoity-toity or have that sort of air around him, or, sometimes you have to, you act in a certain way to establish your position, and in cases like Vinod Mehta, you don't have to. You just have to do your job, and you have to do it well. So it was a great atmosphere. I mean, like she mentioned that, Outlook is one of the inspirations. So many journalists who I spoke to who joined Outlook said that they grew up reading it and they had very different expectations of what working there would be like versus what it actually was. I mean, Vinod Mehta was a legend. I don't think anyone after that even tried to match up to him. So it wouldn't be fair to compare them to Vinod Mehta all the time. But the problem is that the comparison is only not there anymore. Like you cannot really talk about the issues that are coming now and talk about the issues that came out then. You can't talk about it in the same breath because it's like chalk and cheese. It's completely...
They have also changed their tagline, as you have mentioned in the story, from a news magazine to...
Read, think and understand.
Yeah.
What can
when did it change? It was after 2014?
I don't remember the exact date, but it was after...
I think it was after 2019, no? They also changed the number of times an issue comes out. I mean, from it's now once in 10 days. There was a term.
It's a decazine now.
Decazine. Is that a real term? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. So in your story, I have also seen another very interesting thing about push for ad. Like Outlooks, was looking for ads from like, what is there in the segment? What do you want to like?
See, it wasn't like that Outlook didn't function. Didn't run any ads. They were dependent on ads for staying in the business since the very beginning of the magazine.
Right.
But after Vinod Mehta, this push for ads was taken to another level. So much so that if you read the story, like one of the Outlook Hindi editors who was a regular columnist at Outlook, Nilab Mishra, who passed away a few years ago, he left the magazine because he was being chased for getting government ads. Because he was a big editor who could get easy access to, like, say, state governments, chief ministers. So, which could be difficult for marketing people, as we've already pointed out in the story. So there was that push, and then he said it's not his job to get magazine the ads, so that's why he left. And this push for ads, you'll see a lot of every second issue has these tons of advertorials.
Right.
And these are very, for the common reader, they're not very easy to be spotted as advertorials. They can pass off as genuine news stories. And Outlook Hindi was also pulled up by the Press Council of India in 2021 for passing of 2 interviews as news stories.
Right.
So,
it's like the Times of India style that we...
Yes. So,
disguised as news reports.
Yes.
Times of India certainly championed it.
Yeah.
God knows who started it, but they took it to another level. Yeah. I still remember there's some reports about Monsanto, this pharmaceutical company, chemical fertilizers, and how they took out this whole full page about that, how Monsanto was really good for the farmers, etc. And it could really pass off as a good as a news story, but it was an advertorial. So that's so misleading.
So that's where I want to plug in Newslaundry. Newslaundry is not dependent on advertisement. We depend on you. It is you that keep us going. So pay to keep news free. So coming back to the story again, Tanishka and Priyanka, you have also have a segment on the URL doesn't exist here. So it is very interesting to like, what does it mean URL doesn't exist? Like,
so Outlook is a 30-year-old magazine, like Tanishka pointed out in the beginning of the interview. And most magazines of good repute, worth their salt, have very well-maintained digital archives, but not in the case of Outlook. And it's not like we're asking Outlook to archive an edition from 1860s, right? It's just some 30 years ago. But the covers are there, the accompanying stories are not. So, and not just that, I think Tanishka had mentioned in the story that a lot of dates are missing or are just completely wrong, out of context, which make no sense. And for example, the radio tapes, which have like some 30-40 leaks, and Outlook was one of the first publications to put these leaks out in public. But now that you click on these leaks, you want to hear the conversation between a lobbyist and a senior journalist, a bureaucrat, a politician. So you click on that webpage and the URL doesn't exist.
Okay, why is it so? It is because of lack of proper maintenance, or?
That's what we reckon.
They've not archived the system well. And like you mentioned, that so many really senior journalists have worked for Outlook, have been very regular contributors and journalists for the magazine. It's been very hard for them to access their own stories from, again, not just 30 years ago, even like 15 years ago. So a lot of them we spoke to mentioned this trouble they're having. Because I mean, as journalists, all we have is our bylines. And when it's hard to access those, or when a story you did in 2008 appears online as 2023, it is really confusing. Another thing I want to mention about the story and about Outlook in general is we spoke about how it has changed after Chinki. And so when she did take over, she was Outlook's first woman editor-in-chief, which was a big deal. But so what has happened since is that she has made it out to seem that there have been a lot of resignations because she is a woman, and a lot of people have been uncomfortable to work with her because she's a woman, and that's why Outlook has been getting so much flack over the internet and everything. And I mean, as women journalists, we completely understand and acknowledge that yes, this is a problem you always have to face, and I'm sure at a position of power it is even more so. Definitely it's very possible that there were some people who were not comfortable with that, but the problem is that it went way beyond just that. I mean, her persona has been of someone who's, a feminist and like a woman's woman and just is being persecuted because she's a woman. But I have spoken to, out of the 25 journalists I spoke to, at least like 15 to 17 were women who have been personally victimized by the kind of environment at Outlook. So this is the part that we cover in the story that I think was important to mention, because it's been really sad to hear the stories from these journalists, some of whom are really young, some of whom are not young but are senior journalists. I mean, most newsrooms do have some cons or may have a layer of toxic environment. Most newsrooms, not any that I have worked for. But Outlook just took it to another level, or at least has in the last few years.
That is actually a problem in the media landscape, because in my, from my own experience, most of my classmates are not in journalism anymore. They have chosen to be in, and of course toxicity is there, and also the we don't get paid well. That is the problem with the most in this media field. And when you are not getting paid well, at least make the workspace better. If it is toxic, then it is it prompts somebody to leave the
field.
And
there's a level of toxic that we can all jhelo, right?
Speaking of not getting paid well, so this is actually quite interesting that during Vinod Mehta, journalists weren't getting paid well. A lot of journalists told us that they were getting paid peanuts, but they were very happy to still be at Outlook because they were proud of the work they were doing. Right. So I think one journalist even during one of the conversations said that everybody else in the media fraternity called Outlook that you're some kind of Bhutan, in the media landscape, because you guys are very happy but you have no income.
Okay. Right.
In that sense. And but at the same time, like now at Outlook, we don't know how well they're paying their journalists, but like after the story came out, like one journalist texted us that she's a senior editor at Outlook, that her week after week her investigative ideas, stories are shot down. And like we mentioned in the story, that these are just features and explanations and commentary, explainers of sorts. So investigative stories have gone out of the window, and that also takes a lot of toll on people who have joined the magazine to do journalism. Right.
Not to write at least explainer or kind of literary work that
Yeah, like it said in the piece that, there's no problem with say poetry. There are a lot of poems in the new magazine, new version, new avatar. And poetry can be a form of resistance.
Right.
You can speak truth to power through poetry, but poetry is not journalism. At the end of the day,
right.
So I think that is the main.
Did you guys try to speak to Chinki Sinha as well?
I started working on this story in December.
Because we are talking a lot about her, so that's the question.
I started working on this since December, so I have reached out to her on multiple platforms. And actually the CEO did get back to me saying that he would be willing to speak and asked me to send a bunch of questions. And I sent 20-30 questions, but there has been no response since.
Okay, after you sent the question and they didn't respond. Okay. So so that's it in the Outlook, the story of Outlook. And I hope all of you will read it. But to read that story, you have to subscribe to Newslaundry. Let's come to Tanishka's interview, which was well received on the social media. It was an interview with a comedian. So it was just after Kunal Kamra's whole controversy, right? So why did you interview that comedian, and can you just tell us about that interview? Like what actually prompted you to interview a comedian at a time when whole political comedy is in it was making controversy?
So after the Kunal Kamra piece at Quint, we were doing several things to follow up on the development, and one of them was speaking to Daniel Fernandes, because he's actually one of the few comedians who's doing political comedy in India right now. I mean, can you guys think of more? I mean, I know 3 to 4 by
Varun Grover.
Yes, there's
but
Varun.
He does mostly Hindi. In the English landscape, you just have very few people.
There's, of course, Kunal Kamra, there is Azim, there is Daniel, and maybe a couple of more, but it's a very limited pool basically. So wanted to talk to him about the shrinking space to do political comedy, and he is someone who has also he faced a lot of backlash for a joke last year. I mean, the same cycle that we're seeing, and he received threats and his show was cancelled and the usual. So wanted to speak to him to understand just the implications, and is it even possible to do political comedy in India? And another thing we discussed in the interview, which you should watch on the Quint's website and YouTube page, is that while there have been a lot of commentary over the last couple of years about how India's comedy comedy space has been booming. There are so many new artists. There are so many performances that keep happening. I mean, if you open Book My Show every day, there is at least 2 to 3 live shows happening, whether in Bombay or in Delhi. But how many of these sort of comedy acts are actually political in nature or at all? I mean, it's the kind of work that you see coming out is very different from the kind of work that would come out, I mean, years ago. And that's also because people are scared to say anything.
Right.
I mean, so we also spoke about the impact on venues, because you've seen what's happened to the Habitat.
Yeah.
I mean, how many venues are now going to be open to platforming artists, not just comedians?
Is it a concern for the comedians now ki if they make any jokes in any venue, tomorrow it can be vandalized?
Yeah, 100%.
And the money that he has earned out of that show, or the
definitely,
that venue has earned.
Stand-up shows are a major revenue for comedians, and it's also like I mentioned, Daniel had also gone through, he was hounded by, I think it was BJP's Raja Singh, who really got upset a year ago over a joke he cracked, and he had to cancel his shows. He received a lot of threats, so he did apologize, but he told me in the interview that I didn't mean any of the apology. I'm really not sorry. I did that because my family was being affected. The people audiences, the people who are also editing my video, like the staff, they were being hounded. So I mean, after a point, you also have to take responsibility for.
Does
the
it also
people you are
impact their
employing.
social life? Like whenever somebody receives a threat, or somebody goes viral for the controversy or the joke that they make, like when it is political, when the state is after you, like in case of Kunal Kamra, we have seen how police, I think there has been more than 3 FIRs against Kamra. How does it impact their social life? Because they have, after all, they have to live in a society. They have to be in a kind of...
Yeah. So what Daniel told me is something very different from what everyone else has been saying, because Daniel's like, my life was great after that, because more people started coming from my shows. My videos got more views. So, I mean, a lot of people were drawn to the video. I mean, if you see now also, so many people have commented on the video we've put out of Daniel, really supporting what is happening, because he also said it's not about comedy. It is about how politicians are treating people. They think that you are just going to let anything and everything happen. I mean, this is the second controversy this year, and this year has barely begun about comedy. And I mean, there are so many more important things that you and I and people around us need to be talking about.
Daniel also points it out. The real losers here are not the comics, are not the comedians, are the people.
Yeah, definitely.
When the people get entangled in these controversies and focus is taken away from real issues, then who are the real losers?
But this comment of Daniel's, this comment went, I have received, I seen clips of this comment on the social media, and it is very, it's a very different view, as we think,
Which one?
The one that, if there is a controversy, it gets you more audience, there has been mixed up, reaction to that comment.
Yeah, I think, he's saying this in hindsight, and of course, it depends on the level of privilege, and also how after you, the state
because
is,
there was one case in MP where the same he was hounded by the state.
Definitely. There was also a piece on the Quint by Kunal Purohit where he spoke about how there was a comedian who was hounded by the state some 5-6 years ago, and then he went into depression. For the next 5 years, it's been very difficult for him to go up on stage and do his job. So of course it impacts people differently, and but this is it
depends on different
but the accountability should not be on comedians for their jokes. If you want to hold someone accountable, there are really many things, but the state and the media itself is
Speaking of accountability and how instead of letting the media do its work, now you have governments running after media persons.
Not only comedians, even...
your story on Dilwar Hussain Majumdar in Assam. I think you should share some insights.
Kunal Kamra's thing has not even over yet. I think there's fire still going on. Police, Mumbai police
audience members are being called up.
Definitely.
They have to cut their vacations short.
Right, that was a story in the Times of India. So when these things are going on in Assam, in Northeast, one journalist was just arrested because he was, covering a protest on a bank scam.
My God.
Alleged bank scam. So I was also shocked when this news was I got to learn about this. We did a story at the same day. The journalist was detained, but the developments after that was more interesting than the first one, because I think he was arrested on March 25th. By March, like the same day, by like he was arrested in the midnight. So there were journalists, like they were gathered outside the police station at midnight. The next day, they did a long march to the court, and they protested outside the court. I think it is a very rare scene where we can see journalists protesting outside the court.
Yeah, and the unity.
The unity is very important, and it's very interesting. Like it is a very rare occasion, and there are similar incident might have happened in past, but not in the recent past, as I was looking into some of the past incidents as well. So so we have covered it, in my story I tried to cover the whole incident, what happened. It's a blow by blow account of what happened over the week, and how the journalist unity pushed back a government attempts to oppress one journalist.
Was the journalist brother also?
Yesterday his brother was also arrested. So now they targeted his brother
under completely different charges.
It was related to land grabbing, and it was his brother only. So he, of course, we know, okay, like if there is some something wrong with his brother, then they could have done it in past, or there's a timing for everything.
Right.
And the backlash is coming straight from the top. The CM is coming after the journalists.
He's calling out his identity, he's a Bengali Muslim, so he's calling out Dilwar, we are here to
and
put an end to the people.
This is not the first time, is it?
It is not. We have reported earlier, how another journalist was called out by his name, in his name, because he is a Muslim. So this is not new, but
the state government is even trying their best to not even recognize Dilwar as a journalist.
Not even recognize.
Journalists are not journalists just because they don't have a state accreditation, which is so problematic.
Even after all this, Press Club of Guwahati Press Club and other journalists in the state, including senior journalists, editors of the legacy media, whom we have spoken to, and it is there in the story, they have stood behind this journalist, and they were they understand this kind of tactics to not recognize somebody for being in a digital media is a kind of a tactics to divide the journalist fraternity. So it's an interesting development from Assam and the Northeast, and I hope you guys will read the story and will get a ringside view of what is happening in Assam in the media landscape. So that's it. So we are coming to our last segment. Tanishka, what is your recommendation for the week?
Sure, I'd like to recommend two stories. One is on Times of India. It's done by a friend of mine who's a health reporter in Mumbai. It's about how many adults took the BCG vaccine in Mumbai. Actually, 16,000 adults since December, and 50 lakh people were vaccinated over 22 states with this vaccine. But it was without informed consent. They were not told that this was part of a study. So it was, in a way, an experimental vaccine. And this, lakhs of people have been given this vaccine. So it's a really important story that highlights the lack of informed consent. So that is one story. I'd also like to recommend a piece on the Quint titled Scripted Videos by Content Creators Fuel Communal Discord and False Narratives. It's by my colleagues Ishwari Verma and Abhishek Anand. It's a very interesting phenomena that has been documented and reported on the Quint by the Quint about how these scripted videos have been spreading communal disharmony and there has been no repercussions. And this is something that we've all seen on social media many times. So it's an investigation into that.
What about you?
So my recommendation for the week is a series by Third Pole Live. It's on YouTube. It's called Uttarakhand's First Settlers. And the first episode, it has some stunning visuals and we get to know some very lesser known facts about the Himalayas. So it traces how the geography of Himalayas shaped over crores of years has led to the composition of what we know as Uttarakhand right now. Like, for example, every time there was a famine in, say, Bengal, even Karnataka or Rajasthan, people would shift to these fertile lands in the Himalayas, like Uttarakhand. So, like, you have people, the Rawats of Uttarakhand, their origin can be traced back to Rajasthan. They come from this place called Rawat Bhata, sorry, my bad. So it's very interesting, and like I said, it has some very stunning visuals and it takes you back to your geography classes also for 5-10 minutes, but it's amazing. You should check that out.
So my recommendation for this week is the story done by both of you, the Outlook story. People should read this story because it's a very interesting take on one of the India's oldest news magazine. So anybody who has some kind of interest in media and who wants to be a journalist, I think they should read the story to have an idea about the magazine, like the lost magazine culture in India, and about a magazine which was like, highly regarded by the citizens. So my recommendation for this week is the Outlook. With this podcast is adjourned.
Journalism at Newslaundry is powered by the public, because when the public pays, the public is served. Visit newslaundry.com/subscription and pick a payment plan of your choice. Pay to keep news free and independent. Your future, and indeed the future of democracy, depends on it.